Alrighty, welcome back to Brolosophy. Yep, that's right, the Brolosophy podcast. So, obviously, this podcast was formerly AdventureFit Radio, and just to get off to a start and launch this podcast, I suppose I'm going to use this show to kind of talk about how we got here, and what Brolosophy means, and what happened to AdventureFit Radio. So, if you're a new listener, this show's probably going to be quite boring for you. Hang around, though. Hang around. See if you like it. But if you're somebody who's followed AdventureFit Radio for a while, followed my journey for a while, myself and Tommy and Mac and Dave and Wilbur, all the crew, then, this might be pretty interesting to you because lots changed in the last 6 months, I guess. So, firstly, the reason we are now the Brolosophy podcast is because I've shut AdventureFit down. So I think it's a unique position to be in where you have one of the coolest companies in the world. The brand is growing really well. The product's awesome, and you shut it down. But I guess that's what happened. So the reason I am shutting AdventureFit down, and this is nice for me to get off my chest, I guess, because I made the decision in December of last year, and what is it now? It's 2nd of August. I made the decision in December, so it was more than 6 months ago, 7 or 8 months. And then it was just about slowly, wrapping everything up. We had some trips to run. I didn't want anything, looking untoward. I didn't want to, splutter off into a final couple of trips. I wanted everything all guns blazing and nothing really to change. And the last adventure fitters that we had, I wanted them to have an amazing time and so forth. But so 8 months ago, whatever, I guess, I got to the point where I'd started another company, and that company is called Athena. Me and my buddy Drew, Drew's wife Mads had a lot to do with it as well, but me and my buddy Drew started a new company, an outsourcing agency. So basically, taking really talented people from all over the world and plugging them into our clients' businesses. That kind of came out of nowhere, but after a few conversations back and forth and so forth, I proposed to Drew that we go into business together, and he totally agreed. He said, "Let's do it. There's an opportunity there," and we shook hands. We had some Mexican food. It was over tacos and beers in Byron Bay. We shook hands and we went into business together. So, what happened then was, that was probably about a year ago, probably August. What happened then was I realised that I was now the founder of 2 companies and a large, really organisationally and day to day, I had a huge part in running them both. So AdventureFit was obviously my baby, and I was the CEO there, and I had full control of things and full responsibilities. And then obviously I have Drew, and now I have Mads, his wife, with Athena, but still the responsibilities were there, and it was quite, I was pretty involved. So, and now I'm CEO of Athena. So it became pretty clear to me after a few months of operating and after spending 7 or 8 days up at Drew's place, going really deep on Athena, it became very clear to me that one business model was really, really great, and I really enjoyed the idea of it, and one business model was really, really not great, and it was really tough. So rather than be, try and be a multi-time, successful entrepreneur, and I'm not saying AdventureFit wasn't successful, but rather than carrying on and trying to run 2 companies, I decided that it was best to scale it back and focus in on one. I feel like You know, we have so many options in this life, so many options, and I had the option to do something that was really amazing, which was AdventureFit, and to carry that on and to continue to grow it and so on and so forth. And then I had the opportunity to go into business and start a business that really helps business owners, helps them get time back in their life and scale their business and so forth. But you also have to be realistic. I had two companies that were really great. One really promising, I should say, and one that was really great, but it was hard work. And I feel like you know, I didn't want to be somebody that ran two companies. I didn't need two things to get me out of bed. I didn't need two things to be passionate about. I didn't need two things to be successful at. I plan to bounce out of bed, and I plan to be passionate about Athena, and I plan to be successful at Athena. I just think having both Athena and AdventureFit was probably not going to be realistic. So yeah, for the people listening, I'm sure there's people out there that really don't give a fuck about this at all. You know, those people may have already turned off, but yeah, there's probably some people out there that this comes as a shock, or it saddens some people, because yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think AdventureFit was a wholly and solely positive impact on the world, and you know, I guess I'm going to really miss being able to really positively impact people's lives in that way. I guess the reason that I started AdventureFit was I travelled so extensively in my life over a period of 4 or 5, 6 years or whatever it was. I travelled so extensively. I'd probably been to 30 countries or so and spent 12 to 18 months, you know, living abroad, or not living abroad, but backpacking and travelling the world and so forth. And I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky to have been able to do that. And I think I'm a better person for it. I'm not saying I'm perfect or I'm a great person, because I've certainly got tons of faults. But I think I'm a better person for it, and I think everyone becomes a better person from seeing the world, from travelling. And yeah, it's also amazing to open yourself up and, you know, put yourself in positions you wouldn't ordinarily be, and to meet new people and challenge yourself, you know. And that was all that AdventureFit really encapsulated. You know, we really wanted to, you know, take people from all over the world, take them out of their comfort zone, show them new cultures, show them new experiences. And it was bloody awesome. You know, I think with travel, the more of the world you see, then the more grounded you can be, and the more level-headed, and the more, you know, you're appreciative of certainly what you have. Most people listening to this podcast will probably be listening on an iPhone and so forth, and, you know, they might be listening in their cars, they drive to work or whatever. But, you know, most people listening to this are probably in the 1%, you know, the really the Western world, and when you're able to get out and see how the world really is, you know, we're probably the minority, the Western world, and the way that we live. I think it's very, very it expands, you know, your way of thinking, and I think that's super important for people to go through. So I'm glad that I was able to do that. And the other thing is, you know, I just like people to go out there and travel and make new friends. And I remember when my brother turned 18, instead of getting him a present for his birthday, well, I did get him a present, but instead of buying him a gift, buying him a thing, you know, buying him a skateboard or a pack of DVDs or some clothes or a pair of shoes, whatever, I actually gave him a list of 10 things that he could choose from in order for us to go travel together. So 10 different experiences. So one of them was Japan snowboarding. One of them was hiking in New Zealand. One of them was surfing in Indonesia. And there was 7 more. I can't remember what they were. But for my brother, I really wanted him to be able to think the way that I thought, and I wanted him to have seen the things that I've seen because, I just wanted him to be a man of the world, really, and to have travelled. The other great thing with travel, I believe, is I feel like people are their real selves. They're their unabashed, real versions of themselves with, no clique and no family and friends and no social hierarchical, all that bullshit that we attach to ourselves at home. I feel like, all those shackles are just broken when you're traveling and when you're meeting new people, and I think that's fantastic. So, I'm super passionate about travel still. I'm super passionate about everything that I did with AdventureFit, but I guess it's time for me to announce that it's all over. So I've decided to move on. Look, some highlights for me, I guess, were certainly the first trippers. So our first ever AdventureFitters. We actually, so far out, man, going into Athena right now, going to my new company, I was like, okay, cool. This is how we need to structure things from the start. Drew had his ideas, I had my ideas, and we were both very, very thorough and very, very professional from the get-go. I know a lot more than I did when I started AdventureFit, and I wanted to make sure I didn't make the same mistakes getting this business off the ground as I did with AdventureFit. And it's funny what happened with AdventureFit. So the first ever trip, I came up with the name AdventureFit. I remember asking family and friends and so forth. I remember I wanted to call it Camp Nomad. I wanted to call it Vagabond Tours. I wanted to call a bunch of other shit names. And my family and friends, AdventureFit was also one of the names. And I asked I got a little bit of a focus group, and I asked them what they thought, and everybody came up with AdventureFit. So I'm glad we settled on that name. We were actually able to sell the first trip out with just one graphic design poster, which was really cool. So I remember my mate Fletch did our first website, which still runs to this day, and people still give us compliments on it. He'd never done a website before in his life. He's a graphic designer. And he actually just knocked us up one poster, and he built our website, made us one poster, and we sold the trip out. We sold the trip out with the poster before the website, actually. But anyway, my point being, on things that I've done wrong and things that I wouldn't do again, when we actually went to New Zealand, so I said, okay, cool, what's the first trip that I want to plan? Where do I want to start? Where do I want to make a big impact and go, right, bang, this is what we stand for. This is the trip that I want to put out there. This is going to be amazing. I wanted to do the absolute best case scenario, experience I could possibly come up with. And the list of candidates were New Zealand was one, Canada was another, mind-blowing scenery, I haven't been there but it looks beautiful, and Iceland was the other. And Iceland was way too far and way too hard. Canada was way too far and way too hard, and New Zealand was obviously right on our doorstep. So we decided to go to New Zealand, but the itinerary was great. We had 5 or 6 days on the North Island and 5 or 6 days on the South Island. But it was funny because I'd actually never been to New Zealand before in my life. So when we rolled up, I flew in on I think we started the trip on the 22nd of September 2016 or 17. 16, I think. 22nd of September. So I rolled in on I would have rolled in on the 20th, I reckon. I would have rolled in 2 days before the trip. Never been to New Zealand in my life. Never even seen any of the countryside. Not Auckland, not Queenstown, not Franz Josef Glacier. We were going glacier climbing. And I didn't have the money to do it. I didn't have the money to go, okay, cool, I'm going to go do a dry run of this trip, because one of the reasons that AdventureFit was an issue for me was I was always stressed for money, and I started AdventureFit with a bunch of debt. Normally you'd start money with funding, or savings at least, or maybe some funding, some even from your family and friends, but I did the opposite. I started with debt. So I didn't have time to do the runaround and check out New Zealand. So I just landed in the country and I said, fuck it. And we just toured people from north to south. And it was really quite funny because people would ask me on the trip, they're like, oh yeah, okay, Doc, so, how many times have you been to New Zealand? And I would say, no, just same as you. I just arrived 2 days ago. And obviously you would think that was a joke. People would laugh their heads off. And then I'd kind of go, and then just, pretend like I was joking, but I actually wasn't. So, yeah, I mean, New Zealand was unfathomable. It's the most beautiful country. I mean, for those of you guys that have seen Lord of the Rings, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But, the North Island of New Zealand is Waitomo Caves, this huge caving structure. Waitomo Caves, we did a tour in Waitomo Caves. For starters, we abseiled into the fucking cave. We abseiled in. It's like a 30-metre abseil through this tiny little hole in the darkness, all the way down. The cave opens up. You go through this tiny little keyhole, and then it just opens up, and you're in pitch black darkness, and you just you descend 30 metres into the base of the cave, and then the adventure begins from there. So we got on a zip line through the darkness in the middle of a cave. We get off there. We go cliff jumping inside of a cave into the water. Then once we're in the water, we're in the darkness of this cave, and it's filled with glowworms. So not only do you have all these adventures inside of this cave, but it's filled with glowworms. These absolutely beautiful, looks like the fluorescence. What is it? Don't know what it's called. Bioluminescence in the bottom of the ocean. So like when you see at night that the ocean looks all sparkly and looks like it's got stars all through it, that's bioluminescence, I believe. Maybe I'm making that up. Well, these glowworms look the same, but on the ceiling, So these fluoro green, beautiful like speckles all over the place, and it was really great. And I remember one of my favourite moments was we were going through the cave, and everybody was talking. So what happened was we were in these blow-up tubes, and just a regular tubing tube, like a car tyre kind of thing. So our bums are in the tubes, and your feet are wrapped around your friend in front of you, and you've got your friend from behind. You've got their legs, and you're gripping onto them. So you've got this big caterpillar-like, kind of floating, tube train. So anyway, we were floating through the caves in New Zealand, and we got to a point where everyone was chatting away. Everyone's throwing shade at each other, bantering back and forth, and whatever. And then we got to this section of the cave where it was so intensely beautiful. It was unfreaking believable. This huge cavernous cave, and the ceiling was just bright green with all these glowworms and basically shimmering in the night and sparkling. And it was so breathtaking that without any kind of, without any direction or without anybody saying, hey guys, let's take a minute, everybody just went pure, like dead silent, and just continued to float through the cave. And I think, it was one of those times where you're really like, oh man, that was a beautiful experience. And I wouldn't say that about much stuff, I'm a pretty blokey bloke, but oh my god, man, it was so perfect. It was one of those experiences where we were all on the same page. We all knew exactly what to do at that perfect time. It just went without saying that, okay, cool, I need to shut up and just take all this in. And if you haven't done it before, if you have never made it to New Zealand and done the Waitomo Caves, I'm sure there's other cave systems all around the world that, are similar, but Waitomo Caves in New Zealand is really world famous, and man, for good reason. So we actually finished up in the cave, and then after we'd done the cave, after we'd done the glowworm part of the cave, then I can't remember what else we did. We did a bit of kind of like, what would you call it? I don't know. It was like, it was just hardcore cave exploring. So we're climbing through little tiny cracks in the structure and opening up to the next section, and then down again and getting further and further and deeper into this cave. Pretty sketchy stuff. Like, not sketchy, but tell you what, New Zealand, they've got really lax OH&S rules, because in Australia you would never get away with half this shit. But in New Zealand, play on. So, but to finish the actual experience, we came up and out this. We climbed out and up a running waterfall, and it was great. So, the New Zealand trip, as much as... So I went over there with my mate Wilbur, who was the first ever person that I said, hey, mate, can you come join me on a trip? I actually lied there. My mate was the first person I ever asked to join me on a trip, and he said yes. He said, yep, I'll do it with you. And then something came up with Woz, and he couldn't do it, and then he never actually made it on a trip, which is a bit of a bummer. But so Wilbur jumped in. He was keen as mustard as soon as I told him that he was pumped. So Wilbur came along with me, and so myself and Wilbur ran that trip. Wilbur had done a little bit of New Zealand, I'd done zero, and we just flunked our way through it. Real fake it till you make it stuff. But I would have to say that that trip was one of the greatest experiences ever. Particularly for the clients. I think if we ever nailed a trip, that was the one, like Japan very shortly after, like, oh my God, man, that was sick. And, but the first AdventureFit trip was super, super important, and we really hit it out of the park. It was actually, the reason I said it was the best experience for our clients, the reason I said that is because it was actually a terrible experience for me. I look back on it fondly. I look back on it really, really fondly. But I actually, I had the heaviest anxiety, and I fucking deserve it, really. Like, let's be honest, I'd had a lot of really great people that had put their trust in me to take them and give them the, best-in-class experience of a lifetime. Some people that would book on this AdventureFit holiday, like one of our holidays, they would have not had a holiday in 5 years, or they might have not, they might have not been able to, they might have just gone through a divorce, or they might have been, made redundant at work, or whatever it is. They put their trust in us, and I took that really seriously. Shortly after the New Zealand trip, I realised, you can't really get away with doing that stuff. So, look, we nailed it. We absolutely nailed it, but probably didn't deserve to, and it was probably fair game for me, but man, that was probably the first time I ever had hectic anxiety. Real bad stuff, like sitting around the table with, 10 amazing people, myself and Wilbur, and everyone's just having fun, and maybe a couple of beers, or maybe not, maybe it's just a sober night, or sitting around at breakfast or whatever, and the banter going, back and forth, and everyone's having a great time, and I just couldn't get out of my own head, and just couldn't get into it. I just couldn't. I was like trapped in my head really badly, and so that was a tough one for me. But oh man, it was a good trip though. Like it was unfathomable. So the New Zealand trip was a real highlight for me. I think the next step with AdventureFit was probably bringing on Dave and Jackie. Wilbur did the first trip with me, but then we brought on Dave Driscoll and Jackie Perez, and they were. I met Dave over in Bali, and we had a great time. It was actually his birthday. I got offered a job in Bali as head coach of a gym over there, and when I was talking to one of my buddies, they were like, oh, hey, when you get over there, you should look up this dude, Dave Driscoll. He does CrossFit, and I was riding a CrossFit at the time. He does CrossFit, and he seems like a cool guy, and, whatever. So I got passed on his Insta handle, and I started following this dude, Dave. And to be honest, I don't really judge a book by its cover a lot of the time. I'm pretty good like that. I'm pretty open to, figuring out who a person is on the merit of who they are as a person, rather than, taking a stab and thinking one way or the other. But I tell you what, I certainly thought Dave would be a wanker, an absolute wanker. And that's because I was just like, man, this dude, he's got however many, 30,000 Instagram followers and slick back, dark hair and this big beard, and he's got tats all over him, and he's American. He must be a cocky American. This dude must just be a dickhead. And then I went over to Bali and I met Dave, and the first night that we actually we met, we did a workout together and we were partnered up, and from that point I realised that I'd got him all wrong. I realised that he was truly one of the good guys. Yeah, and I think I just, I really think I just got Dave all wrong. And so anyway, Dave joined the team and became one of my really, really good buddies. And we did a number of trips together. And one thing I will say about Dave is he has all the reasons in the world to be that dickhead that I assumed that he would be right from the start. I just thought that this guy, he can't be a good bloke, because if he's a good bloke, he's that good looking, he's that charismatic, surely he can't have a good heart as well. No way. I was just jealous, really. Like, fucking hell, who wouldn't be? But one thing I will say about Dave is he's one of the good guys. The way that I've always explained Dave is he's one of the good guys, He's one of the... I think people are inherently good, but he's one of the real, genuine, kind-hearted dudes, He's out to try and make the world a better place and to try and just bring smiles to everyone around him. So I fucking love the guy, And it's a shame because our relationship was so tight. We were near on best buds, We were near on best buds, and he lived with me over in Australia for a bit, and I once heard him credit me for giving him the motivation to open his gym, which is just thriving, going through the roof. And yeah, it's a bit of a bummer because I'm definitely still close with Dave, and I love the guy, and I think he loves me too, but our personalities clashed a little bit, and we certainly butted heads on a lot of things. And I don't do that with too many people. I mean, Tommy from obviously AdventureFit Radio, we butted heads from time to time. Most other people that I've ever worked with, we've always had a pretty smooth working relationship. But me and Dave, we always butted heads towards the end there. And that was kind of one of the reasons that Dave stopped doing trips, I guess. I don't know whether we've actually that's what I assume, whether we've admitted that or not. But at the end of the day, we're still really good buddies now, and without AdventureFit, we wouldn't have gotten so close. It was a shame that, working together was a bit of a strain on our relationship, but he said to me at one point, he said, look, I don't think I can go forward with AdventureFit. I've got other priorities that I really want to take care of, and he had his own retreat company that he wanted to potentially get off the ground and didn't want to be a conflict of interest and so forth. And he said, I hope this doesn't do anything to our friendship, me not working with AdventureFit. And I said to him, mate, it's going to make our friendship better. It's going to make our friendship 10 times better. So, so that's a learning curve for me, just dealing with, friends and how to also just deal with people, and how to try and not butt heads when you got two big personalities like myself and Dave. So, but I love the guy, I love the guy. Dave did a fantastic job, and I can't thank him enough. He's a fucking legend. And then Jackie joined us on the Japan trip, and that was one of the loosest trips of all time. One of the absolute loosest trips of all time. And so we would always train on AdventureFit trips and, get our heart rates up and practice mindfulness, whether that's yoga or meditation or whatever that may be. And we'd go, whitewater rafting and hiking and rock climbing and all this active stuff. And it was really awesome. But also, we would drink beers and eat burgers, and we would have as much fun as humanly possible. That's what I was always about. I was always about, okay, cool, I think I have a good handle on how a good life should be lived, and this is how I want, this is what I want our trips to represent. So Yeah, but Japan definitely went overboard. Some of the stuff that went down on that trip. Jackie was the instigator, I think. I probably set the tone. I told a story. I told a story on the first night, and I think how it starts is how it ends a lot of the time. So I actually sat down at the very first evening of our trip. The night before, I was really nervous because I was actually meeting Jackie for the first time. So me and Jackie went out and had dinner and had a few beers together and just hit it off straight away. She's a bloody legend, one of the best chicks you'll ever meet. And so we had dinner. We went to this Japanese restaurant. We were seated in a really, really nice location. We're sitting down cross-legged, as is the Japanese custom, and sitting around the table. And everybody was having a couple of beers. There was a little bit of sake going around. Nothing crazy, but, getting to know each other. And there was a group of there was 10 of us or 11 of us or 12 of us maybe at the start. And then halfway through, we had a coaching group, the Hang Strong guys, some gymnastics coaches come over and finish the trip with us. But at the start, there was about 10 or 12. So good crew, like good, healthy crew. And they were all Americans, actually. Apart from Chris Strange, I believe, and maybe me. But anyway, so we're sitting around the table and I said, okay, cool. What I think we do, guys, is let's do a little exercise. What I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about me and, something that maybe you don't know. And then I'll pass it over to Jackie. She'll do the same. And let's go around in circle and, and we'll get to know everybody and so on and so forth. So anyway, so I was like, right. And when I said it, I actually didn't have a story. I didn't have a funny fact about me. So I started off and I said, all right, well, you know what? My name's Doc, obviously. My name's Bill, but people call me Doc, so you guys can call me Doc. I'm the, founder of AdventureFit, and, the reason I started the company was I wanted to be able to, travel the world with people and show them the world, and I wanted to bring in exercise and mindfulness as well, and so on and so forth, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, and a couple of things that you don't know about me, and, and I gave him one little story. And I said, and the first time that I ever came was riding a big blow-up dragon at the local swim centre. And everybody kind of stopped and then just started screaming with laughter. So what actually happened was, when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I'd never actually orgasmed before, right? So I never knew the feeling. I didn't know what the feeling was like. I didn't know even the build up to this sensation, whatever. I'm 12 or 13, right? So anyway, we were at the local swim centre and there was a big blow up, basically play toy at the centre. So, but it happened to be a dragon. So the tail at the back, middle section, and then down the jaws of the dragon and so forth, or the nose of the dragon. I can't really remember. But you would come and climb up the tail. Then you would get across the platform in the middle. And then going down the nose or outside the jaws, however it was positioned, I can't really remember. But going down the face of the dragon, the snout, let's say, there was two railings on each side of the snout, so you wouldn't fall right off the side or fall off, the other side. You would hit the railings and go down and find your way into the water. Because we're only little kids, So I was a little shit growing up, always wanted my own way, always trying to figure out ways that I can make things, work in my advantage. So what I decided to do was, I went down the dragon, climbed up the tail, through the top, down the nose of the dragon. And I did probably 2 or 3 laps, and you're getting a ride of the dragon probably, let's say, every 7 minutes. And I'm only at the swim centre for 45 minutes, So I've got 3 rides of the dragon, and it's 21 minutes in, getting close to 25 minutes. I was like, you know what, fuck this. There's got to be a way to, skip this line. So I decided, instead of swimming around and going up the tail of the dragon, coming down the front, I was like, I'm just going to climb up the front of this dragon. So effectively, if you can imagine the snout of this dragon, which is a big slide, and each side of it, like a bumper bowling at the old bowling alley. So there was blow up railings basically on each side of the dragon's snout, the slide. So I decided I came down the dragon, and then I'd jump up and I'd pull myself up. So you can imagine this little kid reaching forward and then pulling himself with his groin just hanging over the outside of this railing, pulling himself up over and over and over, probably 10 meters, nah, that's probably too much, maybe like 6 meters up every time. But then I would get up there and no one was pulling me up. No teachers, I don't know what they were doing, or the swim instructors, they were just letting me go. So I would pull myself up this dragon, slide down, and I was like, fuck, that felt great. And then anyway, I'd do it again, and I was like, what is going on here? This is the funnest dragon ever. And then anyway, so I've done it a final time, and I've pulled myself up this dragon, and then about halfway up, I've come. And so I told that story. And as you can imagine, as you can imagine, yeah, the crowd loved it, but I think so what actually happened, I started with that story, and then Jackie started with her story, and then she had a real heartfelt story, and moved on to the next. And Chris Strange had been really sick, and that was the reason he wanted to go out on this trip to Japan. He wanted to test himself out and really put himself out there, and went to the next person, and she'd lost a brother, and was it lost a brother? I can't remember exactly everybody's stories, but everybody had a real heartfelt story and a heartfelt reason to why they were out there. And I told this story about fucking coming on a dragon. So the hashtag, we would line up hashtags for the trips, ADVF, hashtag ADVF Japan 17 or whatever was the official hashtag. But the hashtag just became Ride the Dragon. So Ride the Dragon, everyone that actually was on that trip, so I speak to Jackie a fair bit still, just touching base, and she'll ask me, oh, you been, dating any girls and whatever, and I'll always ask her, I'll say, how have you been doing, Jackie? You've been riding the dragon. So it's still AdventureFit vernacular to this day, but the Japan trip was, oh man, it was unreal. It was unreal. So Dave and Jackie, they came and joined me on the Japan trip, and Jackie came and joined us on a few more. And yeah, just one of the most lovable chicks you'll ever meet. One of those real, oh yeah, pleased to meet you, Jackie Perez. Oh shit, did I just fart? Sorry. One of those kind of chicks, just real rough around the edges, real down to earth, and just a knucklehead. But I love her. So that was great. I think as AdventureFit, like a lot of companies, a lot of companies that don't continue on, they'll probably start, like a lot of things, they'll start really exciting, and, it's that honeymoon period. They'll start really exciting, everything will be, no matter how bad something's going, it'll be okay, and, the smallest win will be celebrated hugely, and so on and so forth. Well, for me, the trips were hard because I had this this mixture of, imposter syndrome, and also I had a lot of debt, so I was always stressed for cash on trips and so forth. But I still definitely had that honeymoon period where I was like, all right, cool, I'm doing something amazing, I feel like I'm doing a good job of it, the brand's going to be cool. And I always thought eventually it would be the biggest company on the planet. I remember somebody said to me, hey, you've made it 12 months, congratulations, that's further than, whatever that stat is, further than 80% of other businesses out there. They would fail in the first 12 months. And I was just shocked when somebody said that to me. I was like, what? I was like, far out. I've never even contemplated failure. It's never even crossed my mind that could happen. Like, this is AdventureFit's going to be huge. It's a beautiful thing. It's too good to be true, So I certainly had that honeymoon period, and that went for a good 12 or 18 months. But then, so let's say AdventureFit was a five-year thing, from concept to when we ran our last trip. And it pretty much was. So concept, 6 to 9 months, 12 months in, by that stage we'd run our first trip, awesome. The next probably 9 months, honeymoon period, love and life, just really, I really was. And I loved, one thing that I always did love was loved meeting the people every single time I would meet them. You can't put a price on a friendship, and I never will. And that's always been, the highlight for me with AdventureFit. It's never been the things that we do, the stuff that we see, that all becomes boring and mundane. The people that we meet, I'll never be able to replace those friends that I've made. But I definitely went through a period where, okay, cool, honeymoon period's over. What do we do now? All right, cool. Well, we'll start a podcast. We'll inject some life into the brand, and it'll get me fired up, and it'll be a good way to, create content and engage with people and so forth. And I fucking love the podcast, and this is why I'm still doing it today, and we're re-releasing the podcast, Brolosophy now. But, that wore off as well a little bit. So it got to the point where AdventureFit was, all it was really for a long time there was just really extremely stressful. So because I started AdventureFit with a lot of debt, what actually happened was, I believe that the travel industry, the model is really tough. You're trying to sell something that you don't need. So that's very expensive, sorry. So if you think of like 4 quadrants of sales, so there's selling stuff that is, cheap that you need, and you'll always sell that. Then there's, that's like toothpaste and toilet paper, whatever. There's stuff that you don't need that's really cheap. You'll also be able to sell that. No worries. So, ticket to the movies and, a trip to, a whole weekend away with your partner or whatever. Then there's stuff that you do need that's expensive, and that's, okay, cool. That's like doctors and lawyers, and, you get cancer, you're not going to go, sorry, bro, can't afford it. I'll figure this out myself, doc. You're going to go, okay, cool, take me to the, best physician in the world. Lawyers, you don't want to go to jail, you'll go, get yourself in trouble, you go to a good lawyer. And then there's stuff that you don't need that's expensive. So that's where we are. We're the top end of that, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, whatever it was, for an experience. Life-changing experience for so many people, but how do you actually, how do you make that a tangible thing? You're not selling a product, you're selling a feeling, and that's very hard to sell. And it's also a luxury item. So the business model for me sucks. I actually hate the business model of travel. I had a mentor, Rob McNaught, who, I say mentor, but he really just gave me a little bit of advice when I was very much first getting off the ground. And I said to him after a couple of phone calls, only phone calls with Rob, we never met face to face, but a couple of phone calls that I went in depth with him and asked him all the questions in the world, and it would have been the dumbest questions. I'd love to hear what I was asking now. But at the very end of that conversation, I said to Rob, if you had one piece of advice, for me going out and starting this, what would that one piece of advice be? And he said, Bill, my one piece of advice is don't start. Whatever you do not start what you're about to start. And I thought he was joking, obviously, at the start. And then, sure enough, he wasn't, and that's why, You're always looking over your shoulder. When am I, it's so cyclical, the basically seasons and how and when people will buy, and, if there's a downturn, that never really happened with me, but, it's a terrible model. And starting the business without any money meant that I ran just incredibly close to not having enough money to run a trip every single time it ran for about 2.5 years there. So nobody would have known this, obviously. This is business. This is what a real business looks like. So, well, not all businesses, but, this is what a business can look like. And it's about faking it till you make it, putting on a brave face and scratching and clawing and trying to, do everything you can to not let anyone down. And that was the thing that scared me the most always was, as I said, people would come to us because they needed something in their life. They needed a kickstart. They needed some time away. They needed to, get themselves back on track, whatever it was. And I didn't realize this till later on in the piece, but that was truly it. People really needed something, and they wanted us to be that thing. So people trusted us so much, and I, put so much pressure on myself to give these guys, all of our adventure fitters, the greatest experience known to man. So imagine this position, which is the position that I was routinely in, and by routinely I mean every single time we ran a trip, and we would run a trip every 2 months. Imagine you would get 3 weeks out from a trip, and you would look at your finances, and you would say, all right, cool, I need to come up with $20,000 in order to make this trip happen, or I'm going to let 10 people down. just teleport yourself into my shoes for a little bit there. It was a fucking nightmare, you know. It was the stuff that would make you sick to your stomach. Absolutely sick to your stomach. And, you know, that's what it dealt with every single 2 months, you know, every single 2 months. And I would do far out, man. I was creative. Like, I would release the most epic trip of all time, and I would say, guys, you know, here's a trip to Iceland. First time ever. Book in quick. You'll get $750 off to the first, you know, 3 people that pay in full, whatever it was. You know, these ridiculous marketing campaigns that would take away all of our margin on the actual trip that we were selling in order to hurry people to throw money into our bank account. You know, I borrowed money off my mum and my grandma, so $20,000 each. And that's still the debts would pile up. And every time I'd be in the same position, you know, I got to a holding pattern where, you know, we weren't going into really more debt, but every time, you know, and it was just, man, it was... I ran one trip that before the trip had started, we ran 2 trips back to back once. This was probably when I fell out of love with AdventureFit in a big way. This is what was the nail in the coffin for me. And I had Athena not come around, I probably would still be trying to make AdventureFit work, you know, driving it forward, because I'm driven and stubborn and I'm an idiot. But this particular point in time, so what happened was we had a trip that was running that my team were leading, and the day that the trip was starting, we had enough money in our bank account to cover part of the trip. So we had tons and tons, a lot of money outstanding that we were expecting. But I'd run out of ideas, I'd run out of, you know, we had enough for 3 days to run of a 7-day trip at the start of the trip. And I had 72 hours to find the other $12,000 or $13,000, whatever it was. And I knew that I would make that trip happen. It gave me fucking nightmares that I wouldn't. It gave me nightmares for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks beforehand, because I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was coming. I was hoping for a miracle and I didn't get one. And yeah, we made it happen. You know, I pulled out all the stops and I got the money across the line, and that trip ran successfully. And then, the day that trip finished, I was in Greece leading a trip that was in the exact same position, but even worse. You know, we had day to day, I was getting money coming in from outstanding invoices, and I was negotiating with, you know, credit card suppliers that I had, and every day I would get enough money to carry on the next 36 hours. And I wouldn't wish that feeling upon my worst enemy. I would not wish that feeling upon my worst enemy. I had seen a psychologist for, you know, since 2016, since I started AdventureFit, you know, on and off. Not anymore, I don't. I'm flying now. I feel really great. Sound a little bit negative now telling you the story of AdventureFit, but I'm actually doing really great, and I can, you know, I plan to continue doing great. So, but I started seeing a psychologist, and the way that I would explain it to Daryl, my psychologist, was I would explain it as acute financial stress depression. I felt like, I told my mate before this Greece trip ran, I said to my mate who's been medicated, he's been suicidal before, he's actually, you know, he's heavily medicated for anxiety and depression, one of my best mates. And I said to him, he messaged me and said, hey mate, how's the trip going? How's the prep going? Prep, not the trip actually. It was like a week before I was in London. And he said, how's it all shaping up? And I said, bro, I am so emotionally shot. I said, I feel like I've got someone standing on my chest all day, every day. And I feel just a little bit sad the moment I wake up and all the way till I close my eyes at night. And he messaged me back and he said, "That's depression, bro." And when he said that to me, I looked at my screen on my phone and I was like, fuck. Because I knew that he was right. You know, I knew that he was right. And you know, we got through that trip and it was an ace trip. I was absolutely scattered with anxiety. I was miserable. I had panic attacks every day behind the scenes. But we ran through the trip and we got amazing, you know, results and incredible tips, and everyone wrote us a letter at the end of the trip, and, you know, the most amazing, incredible compliments you could ever imagine. And I don't know how the fuck we did it, but we did. And that's the main thing, you know. That's the main thing. That's all I ever wanted to do was it's like a drug. Giving someone a life-changing experience, something that they'll truly cherish forever, something that, you know, brings a tear to their eye when they talk about it with their friends. That's like a drug. It's like heroin. You know, that's why I did it. That's the thing that kept me going when I was so anxious and so scattered and so beat down and so, you know, financially fucked. But the feeling that we would get for people, that feeling was just priceless. So that's when I fell out of love with AdventureFit, I guess. That's when kind of the damage had been done, and I probably was never coming back from that. You know, as I said, if I didn't have Athena, which Athena's thundering along, it's so good. You know, our clients are so stoked. We've never lost an employee in the year that we've been operating, and we got 50 employees. It's going so well, and if it wasn't for Athena, I'd probably still be doing AdventureFit, and it'd probably still be growing, and people would probably still be getting the most amazing experience ever. It would be rad. But I wouldn't be in love with it, I don't think. You know, the idea I was in love with the result that we would get people. But the day-to-day, you know, I just lost it. I'd absolutely lost it, and it really wasn't coming back. So, you know, I'm really happy that I am where I am. My day-to-day is, you know, I wake up and I've got a normal amount of work on my plate. I take Ziggy for a walk. I'm never stressed. I've got time to go and train at the gym. I've started weightlifting again, which I'm loving. And I wouldn't have had that if I had two companies. You know, I certainly wouldn't have had that if I was trying to manage two companies. And I probably wouldn't have had that if I even had just the one, and that one was AdventureFit, you know. It's just, yeah, it really wasn't firing me up. And when that's the case, you know, we had so many things that were going great, you know. We had so many things that were going great when I decided it was time to wind it up. And we may have failed, but we certainly wouldn't have failed for a while, I think. But when things aren't firing you up, you know, when a beautiful idea and a great concept and an awesome product and something that's a positive impact on the world, it doesn't always translate into success, you know. It doesn't always mean that it'll work. And this is a beautiful representation of that, I guess, you know. I feel like the arc of AdventureFit is very similar to the arc of Daenerys Targaryen, you know, Stormborn, Mother of Dragons. I feel like the idea was so beautiful, you know. Everybody loved it. Everybody loved her so much. And towards the end, under heavy-duty stress, it basically torched a fucking city full of people. And that's the best analogy that I can come up with. That city full of people was just my emotions. So, yeah. But, man, there were some highlights. Like, fuck. We had guys and girls that would come, they would plan their whole life around AdventureFit, you know, and I've got a lot of people to thank, really. I've got a list here, and you know, if you're not on the list, then I'm really sorry, and if you think you should have been, but you know, I think the first people that I need to thank is, you know, I need to thank Wilbur. Wilbur was, you know, my original right-hand man, And he led trips right up till the end. He only led a small number of trips, but the ones that he led, like, oh my God, man, you could not pick a better tour leader. Like, Wilbur is just absolutely sensational. I'm telling you, you couldn't get any better. And a great buddy of mine, I love Wilbur. And yeah, next is Dave. Dave was, people used to say to me all the time that Dave and how did you guys found AdventureFit? And I said, I fucking founded it. I'm the boss, that's my company. But, people thought that it was Dave and I, because Dave was there so, he was so involved, and he was such a part of the brand, and so amazing for it to grow when it was so small, his personal brand and what he could do and the smiles he could put on people's faces. I fucking love that guy. I owe him so much. I owe him absolutely so much. Jackie as well. Jackie, I just owe laughter. I just owe nothing but laughter. She's an idiot. She's a goose. She's a knucklehead. Knucklehead is probably like the best word I would have to describe her. But I love that girl. She's like Dave. She's one of the good guys in this world. She's a fucking ripper. My brother came and started the trip with me, and that was one of my worst trips where I was most anxious. Far out, that was bad. And I hated that, I hated being like that around my brother. But, he was there with me, and he was a young man. He was only probably 21, 22. And he basically stood up, and he was the leader that I couldn't really be on that trip. So, forever thankful for Jack. Mac was, once Dave kind of left us, Mac became our number one guy, and Mac actually was a client. Mac and I became buddies on one of our trips on our Iceland trip. And my screensaver actually right now, you won't be able to see it if you're on the YouTubes, and you obviously won't be able to see it if you're on the podcast, but if you're on the audio. But my screensaver is an Iceland trip where we're all about to jump, we're all crouched about to take off, and Mac's jumping straight across the screen off this huge rock in front of this amazing waterfall. And man, you couldn't get a better tour leader than Mac. You could not get a better tour leader than Mac. He just so professional, did such a great job, so good with people. He actually one of his last trips, he rubbed a bunch of people the wrong way, and I flew the flag for him big time. I always told my staff, live by the sword, die by the sword. I want you to be yourselves. If you feel like there's an inappropriate joke that might improve the night rather than make the night worse, then by all means, go on and say that inappropriate joke or tell that inappropriate story, but use your best judgment. And, you're all adults and you've all got good judgment, so I trust you. So, Mac, that whole thing about how it starts is how it ends. Mac was better than me at leading trips. Him and Dave probably the best we had, And Mac actually started a story on the Vietnam trip a year or so ago. And there was a lot of AdventureFit Radio podcast listeners that were on that trip, and a couple of them, I don't know who it was because I wasn't there, but a couple of them asked Mac, across the dinner table on the first night, they said, hey Mac, we heard on AdventureFit Radio that you'd masturbated in a float tank. Another masturbation story. Sorry guys, to all you listeners. We'd heard that you'd jacked off in a float tank. Do you have any other funny stories about jacking off? And Mac reckons, I've spoken to him in depth about this a number of occasions. He reckons he surveyed the room and he was like, yeah, I reckon I've got this. So he said, yeah, I do actually. I remember I was really late to a meeting one day, and on the way to the meeting, I just couldn't stop thinking about sex, and I had this erection in my pants, and I thought, well, I can't walk into the meeting like this. Like, what am I going to do? I've got 10 minutes till I'm at the meeting. So he pulled over into the emergency lane and he jacked off. And then he went into the meeting. I reckon it's a pretty funny story, to be honest. I would laugh at that, particularly over a couple of beers and so forth. But I'm an idiot, remember? You got to remember I'm an idiot. But we had, it's probably no worse than my riding the dragon story, my riding the dragon story is probably akin to you know, pulling it. Well, it's probably not. Mine was, I didn't know what was going on, you know. I wasn't, look, there was no intent with me and the dragon. There was certainly intent with Mac pulling over in the emergency lane and, you know, jacking off. But I guess the stories are very similar, you know, and I read my crowd and I probably delivered it pretty well and so forth. And Mac, I reckon he must have just stumbled when in the delivery, and the crowd certainly wasn't right, actually, to be fair. There was two people that took offence to it. Look, he just didn't read the crowd. And it actually caused the biggest furor after the trip had run, where, you know, people calling up and complain. We'd never had a complaint in the history of AdventureFit. We'd never had a complaint. We'd had a little bit of feedback and constructive criticism, I guess. Maybe just feedback, I would call it. But man, I got phone calls. I got lengthy, you know, foot-long email talking about how unprofessional, you know, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, fuck. But I love Mac, and, you know, he could not have done a better job. And I backed him in. When all this stuff happened, I was like, look, he's one of the good guys. He's got a nice heart, and he fucked up, you know. He told a story that was a bit inappropriate, and, you know, he really paid for it on that trip. You know, everything that he did that was neutral, you know, was looked at poorly, and everything that he did that was poor was the worst thing on the planet, and everything he did was good was, you know, it was like, meh, you know, because he'd already kind of been, I think, you know, he'd kind of tainted himself with a number of the trip goers, and that was a shame, you know, because I love Mac. He's just the nicest guy, and for people to have that opinion of him, that he was unprofessional, whatever, it was shit house. So I really hated that. But man, I owe that guy so much. He got me through when I was going through my toughest period. He got me through it. He was my mentor, my, you know, coach, my friend, whatever. And man, one of the best. Tommy is the other one. You know, Tommy's last of the coaches that I mentioned, and Tommy to this day is one of my best buddies. You know, like, we were like a brother relationship. I'm the older brother, he's the younger brother, and you know, I was also his employer, I guess, to a degree, with the podcast and with the trips, and we butted heads a lot, you know, me and Tommy, and might not look like it might not look like it with the cameras on and stuff, but behind the scenes, we butted heads more than a bit above average, for sure, a bit above average. Like, we butted heads, but I mean, everything you saw on camera was all real, and we love each other. And we just went and caught up last Friday. We probably catch up once or twice a month for sure. And I love this dude. He's always going to be like a brother to me. So, you know, I love Tommy. Tommy was another guy that, like my brother, you know, my inability to relax due to the stress that I was under with these trips, I think it pushed Tommy, it pushed Jack, and, you know, it pushed these guys to lead, you know, to be leaders and to be more mature than their age, or than their years, really, because Tommy was doing trips with us at, you know, 23, 24, whatever, and leading and guiding, you know, a large group of adults, and he did a sick job. Like, he's the funniest dude I've ever met, I reckon, and I owe him lots of thanks. So there's three guys that I need to thank that are particularly important to me, and they're my three guys in the Philippines, and that's Mon, my first ever staff member. I just came back from Mon's wedding over in the Philippines, and I adore the guy. You know, he's if I could pick anybody, right? So Athena, we have 11 of us, 3 directors, I'm one of them, 8 full-time staff members. At Athena, at AdventureFit, we had 4. We had Mon, Aaron, Alvin, and Vicky. But we also had a lot of people come and go throughout, you know. And we were going to try and bring Mon over to Athena, but it didn't end up working out. But when I was speaking to Drew about it, Drew, my you know, one of my partners at Athena, I said to Drew, hey man, I think we can get Mon across, and he might work for Athena, and he's a real all-star. Like, he's one of the best. And he said, all right, cool. Like, how good is he? I said, he's as good as there is. He said, okay, would you hire him again if you had your time? That's how I always rate, that's how I always rate employees. Would I hire him again if I had my time again, knowing what I know now? And he would be my first draft choice out of 50 people I've dealt with working with him, 100 people, however many I've dealt with. He's my number one starter, 100%, Mon Echeverria. And yeah, like I would be working on a Saturday afternoon, into Saturday night. I'd wake up and work on a Sunday. And then I'd notice, like, in our shared folders and whatever, I'd notice all this work getting done. And then Mon would just, I'd be online and I'd get this message from Mon, hey Doc, can you give me an update on X, Y, and Z? It might be 3 p.m. on Sunday. And I'd say, what do you mean? Like, just let's talk about it tomorrow. He's like, no, I'm just doing a bit now. Can you just give me an update on it? He would go into the office and just, pump out work and of his own accord, and he cared about the brand, he cared about me, and he cared about the people that we served. Absolute bloody legend. Aaron, I can't say enough good things about Aaron. He's unfathomably intelligent. He's got an unfathomable energy, and he just brought it every day at AdventureFit, and I bloody love him for it. Alvin is like my little brother, the Gongy, the Gong Doctor, Dr. Gongzo. I actually was lucky enough to go and spend some time with Alvin and his family over in the Philippines recently when I went over for Mon's wedding. I spent a lot of time with Aaron. We caught up for a bunch of breakfasts and lunches and dinners. I saw Mon at his wedding. He was busy otherwise, obviously, but I went and stayed with Alvin and his family. Alvin Sr., his dad. I met his little brother, all his buddies, met his beautiful wife, and yeah, he's always been like a brother to me, and a little brother. I feel like I'm his older brother. Mon always used to feel like my older brother because he would pull me into line, but Alvin has always been, I feel like he's my little brother. I feel like he looks up to me, and I feel like we really love each other, and yeah, we both cried. We both bawled our eyes out when I told him that we're not going to be working with each other anymore. And he's the guy that put all these podcasts together. So if you've listened to AdventureFit Radio from the start, Alvin was there from the start, from day one. He was the guy putting it all together in the back end. And he doesn't work with us anymore, but, I bloody love him. Vicky came in. Vicky came in and did social media for us at AdventureFit, and she's actually still with us at Athena, and she's the glue that the social glue that binds it all together. She's a lovely lady. We employ her boyfriend, we employ her dad. Basically they're all family to us now, and she's bloody great. And then Rhiannon DaCosta. Rhi was my first ever, probably before Mon, she was my first employee. She was we would just do bits and pieces together. She was like a rep for me up in Queensland, and she would, she just loved the idea and wanted to get involved in any way she could. And that was the interesting thing about AdventureFit is people would climb over hot coals to have anything to do with us. I would get resumes every week with people screaming to, please, can I get on staff? We don't get that with Athena. People would, every week I'd get resumes, and I was so upset that I couldn't employ everyone and make everyone's dreams come true and all that. But yeah, Rhi and I worked together, and she was my first right-hand wing woman and someone that I could lean on. And Mitch and Aaron up in New South Wales, they were the same, a couple, and they were my New South Wales reps, and they did a bloody great job and really love the brand, and that's all you can really ask for. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. All I wanted to do is, for a lot of people that are, new to AdventureFit Radio or new to Brolosophy and what have you, you're probably not listening to this because you probably zoned out a while ago. And people that are AdventureFit through and through, they might not have listened this far, but those that did, I just wanted to kind of get the story out there, get it all off my chest, and announce that, obviously Adventure is no longer carrying on, and just thank everyone for, a great experience for me and for everyone involved. So that's it from me, guys. Brolosophy is going to be sick We've got mad guests coming up. I'm really fired up about it. And you guys should be too, so stand by for some epic content. And basically, you know, we just want to be telling interesting and important stories. And it's really philosophy through the eyes of an idiot. And that idiot is me. So you'll be hearing lots more of my voice, so make sure you subscribe, because they won't be all sad solo rants like this. They're going to be epic. We got so many good guests coming up. So that's it from me, guys. This is the Brolosophy podcast going forward. Philosophy through the eyes of an idiot, and that's a wrap.